So this is a video where I'm going to give you all the little bits of information that I forgot or that you might need to know before you start it. First, I put oil in it, but I think I may have overfilled it just a little bit. My thought is that once it gets oil pumped around to the top end and everything, the oil level will go down a little bit, because we've got these two marks on this window here, and it's supposed to be between the two. I'm about halfway between the top of the window and the top mark, but it should be okay. I put 1.5 quarts in, which is the minimum that you're supposed to put in when you drain it. The manual says 1.5 for an oil change, 1.6 with a filter, and 1.9 at disassembly. So I'm guessing I'm probably going to have to add a little bit more oil to it. You notice I've got the bike level, and that's how you're supposed to check the oil down there. I've reinstalled all the little bits and pieces, and I've put coolant in it too. I think there's just a little tiny bit in the reserve tank. And the way you're supposed to do coolant is you take this cap off, again, remember that it's got that screw, and then you pour the coolant in, and then you need to, well, I can show you. I've got it open right here. Again, best tool for this bike right here. To bleed the air, put it in neutral, let it idle for a couple minutes, which we need to do anyway to heat treat the big bore kit, get it broke in. Snap the throttle 3 to 4 times to bleed the air out. Stop the engine and add coolant again to the radiator, and then put the radiator cap on and tighten the screw, and then after that we fill our overflow reservoir up. And for those of you that didn't know, there's two marks here which are the same as these two, an upper and lower level, so you want the coolant somewhere in between the two. I am putting engine ice in it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but any coolant that you get from a motorcycle dealer should be okay. For those of you who are sticklers for sticking with what the manufacturer says, Pro Honda HP coolant or equivalent, high quality ethylene glycol antifreeze containing silicate-free corrosion inhibitors. Put coolant in it so it doesn't fry itself, basically. So I put the gas tank and the seat on. That's enough to run it. I'm going to leave all the body panels off so that I can check the engine while it's running. You're going to want to make sure you've got all your timing plugs back in and your oil plugs in the bottom. Make sure all your hose clamps are tight, that sort of thing. One thing I forgot to mention in the valve cover video is most sealants require time to set up and cure. I usually let stuff sit for 24 hours if I can. You know, a lot of mechanics don't do that, because if you take your car into a dealership to get like the rear end fluid changed, they're gonna slap the silicone on and drive it out in the lot, and there you go. But if you let it set up and cure, it will have a better chance of staying sealed. So that's it for now. That's not it for this video, because we're gonna show the coolant and the correct measurement for oil in this video. It's just as soon as the battery's charged and the gas station's open back up, so I can get some gas, because I've only got 50 to 1 and that's not going in here. So the bike sat overnight from when I initially filled it. The coolant level went down a little bit, so I'm just gonna top it off here. Now we're technically we're still doing the coolant service on it, because we need to bleed the air out, but this is also going to be the first startup of the new engine, so here we go. I'm doing the key twice to get the fuel pump primed because it was completely empty. There we go. Alright, now for our air bleeding. It's been running for 2 minutes. I'm just going to crack the throttle a couple of times and then we'll refill it. Okay, I heard some air bubble up through the radiator, so we'll go ahead and Top this off. At this point we can go ahead and put our radiator cap back on. And don't forget to put the little screw back in it. Now we'll go over to the other side and fill the overflow. Now we're going to fill this up, and we have a lower and an upper. When the engine is cold, because I did run it, but it's still basically cold, we're only going to want to be a little bit above the lower side of this. So I'm probably going to go right to where these black part numbers are on here. The reason for that is when we start running the engine and it gets hot, the coolant's going to expand a little bit and come up towards the upper limit. So we don't want to put too much in and have it come flying out. Now that the engine ran a little bit, you know how I said I had overfilled it and it was almost to the top of the window? Right now we're at right about halfway, so that's good right there. I'm going to push the bike outside now, and we're going to run it until it gets completely up to operating temperature as part of the installation process for this big bore kit. We did the coolant bleed. We have oil in it. Now we're going to heat it up so everything can get a nice heat cycle on it. While this is warming up, it's a good time to go around the engine and make sure nothing is leaking. So there's 170 degrees, and if I look back at the video, I think that took about just about 9 minutes sitting here idling to get to that temperature. So if you don't have a temperature gauge, I'd say 8 to 10 minutes and you've got a full heat cycle on this. Now again, we're gonna just grab the camera, go around the bike, look at it, make sure nothing's leaking. So basically anything that you touched, hoses that you took apart, anything, make sure it's not leaking. Key points to check would be the radiator hoses, these two parts of the head gasket. I mean, check it all the way around, but especially right here. Base gasket, and between the head and the cylinder we want to check. Timing cover, let's see here, none of those are leaking. My engine's pretty dirty. I don't really wash this bike near as much as I should, but if you start with a clean engine and clean it off after you're done working on it, it's a lot easier to see where it's leaking. We look underneath, nothing leaking under there. I checked for exhaust leaks. The exhaust is not leaking. Look at our coolant level. Pull the bike up. Pull the bike up level. It's right in the middle. That's right where we want it. Check the oil level. It's right in the middle where we want it. So things to keep an eye on. I am guilty of not checking the bike before I take off on a ride. Some people are really religious about it. I am not. For about the first 1,000 miles, every single time I ride this bike, I'm going to check oil level and the coolant level. Now you can check the coolant level from the front. There's a high and a low mark right here on it. You can see that through the plastic. So just be very aware of fluid levels, what the engine sounds like, that sort of thing when you're riding it initially. Now I'm not worried about the fueling on this bike because it's done automatically for me, but if you've got the EJK kit, you know, you're gonna have to really listen to this engine, take it out, test drive it, fine tune it and adjust it. I have no desire to do that. I'm not gonna put one of those on this bike just to show how it's done. I went and spent a little bit extra money on this AFR EFI by Dobeck, and it's done. I don't have to worry about it. I've got my ratio up here. I know if it's going fat or lean, nice and easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and slap the plastic back on this. I think probably put some gear on and take it for a test drive, see how it feels now. How do we end it?
Thanks for watching.
Woo! We got it built!